enormous accumulation and growth in PIP payments in this country. Now, reform will have sweeping welfare reforms that we will announce in the coming months and years. And you can expect a Nigel Farage prime ministership to transform welfare in this country. We're starting by announcing something today with regards to PIP, which staggeringly now accounts for 1% of UK GDP. Not UK public spending, 1% of GDP is being spent on PIP. We are betraying our young people. We'll talk more about that. The caseload, new claimants for under 25s in this country on PIP have tripled in 5 years. So we are betraying our young people. Reassessments are basically not happening anymore. So these young people are being labelled, they're being basically tossed onto a scrap heap for the rest of their lives. There's nothing about that we are remotely willing to accept. So we have some solutions to these problems which we want to talk about today. Before that, I'm going to hand over to Lee Anderson.
Thank you. And personal independent payments, they are now the largest component of disability benefits in the UK, and that's 25.7 billion spent just on PIP alone over the last year. And this is projected to rise to 33.5 billion by 2028. The figures are truly staggering. And a lot of this is actually being driven by the increasing number of claims for mental illness. And Reform UK, under the leadership of Nigel Farage, will tackle this head on. And many of you will have heard about the alarm clock generation from people like Nigel, myself and Zia and Richard. Well, I'm part of that generation, a generation of people who actually got up in the morning listening to their parents' alarm clocks go off. It was the same for me. I used to listen to my dad's alarm clock go off in the morning at 5 o'clock, and he went to do a shift at the local pit. And for me, this was the best education a young man could get. It taught me that if you want to live a good life in a great country, then you must do your bit. You must get up in the morning and go to work for your family, for your community, and for your country. And it also taught me that hard work pays. It can provide you with the good things in life. It can also lead to a longer and healthier life, and more importantly, make you feel like you've got a stake in society. I think we all want that. We all want to feel good about ourselves and do our bit for our country. But now we're in a situation where the alarm clock isn't heard as often as it should be, and the alarm clock generation is now being replaced by an anxiety generation. A generation of young people that can forget about getting up in the morning and going to work and instead stay at home all day, courtesy of the taxpayer-funded employment support allowance and personal independent payments. And the people bearing the brunt of this cost are the very same people who still use an alarm clock and get up for work in the morning, and it's not fair. Over 1.4 million people in this country claim PIP for some sort of psychiatric disorder in the UK. A third of those are for mixed anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, and anxiety disorders. And the symptoms of these disorders can include persistent worrying, sadness, irritability, difficulty concentrating, and changes in sleep or appetite. Now, who in this room hasn't suffered from any of the above symptoms? Persistent sadness. Tell me about it. I've had persistent sadness since July last year with this awful Labour government, and over the next 4 years there'll be many more people having persistent sadness and wanting to put a claim in for PIP, but we're going to meet that head on. And we must ask ourselves if the above symptoms justify condemning someone to a life on benefits, because we know that the longer you are on benefits, then the less likely you are to get a job, and you will remain dependent on the state, because we also know that 85% of people on PIP do not work. Remember, if you're in a workless household and on PIP for anxiety, there are also other benefits that household is entitled to, and therefore other costs we must take into consideration, such as universal credit, which covers housing costs, council tax support, and not to mention employment support allowance. And we have the ludicrous situation where we could have two people on PIP in a household, both claiming carers allowance for each other. It's absolute nonsense. As I said earlier, fewer than 1 in 6 people on PIP are in work. It's actually a de facto out of work benefit. For many people in this country, PIP is a necessary lifeline to be able to live a dignified life. But for some, sadly, it's an excuse not to go to work. 2 in 3 people on universal credit also claim PIP. Around 1 million are claiming PIP, universal credit, health and housing benefit. If you had the PIP, the universal credit, and the standard, if you had the PIP, universal housing and universal credit, health plus the standard allowance, you can take home up to £2,500 a year, more than someone on national minimum wage after tax and national insurance. That is simply not fair. The cost to the taxpayer runs into the billions and creates a culture within the household that it's okay not to go to work. It's okay to live off the state, and it's okay not to have an alarm clock. Well, it's not okay, and it's not fair. And it's not fair on those people who get up in the morning and go to work and put a shift in. If you're well enough to go to work, then claiming benefits should not be an option. We should all do our bit in this country to ensure that we pay into a system that helps people who are genuinely ill and disabled, rather than throw people on the scrap heap who could and should work. I believe that work is good for your mental health. It gives you a purpose, it provides a wage, it makes you feel part of a team, and it can give you confidence and a sense of pride, and help you to become a role model for your family and your community. And it can also give you friends for life. No tablet, no medication, and no therapy can provide any of that. Therefore, a Reform UK government would fully remove those with anxiety disorders, but not serious psychiatric disorders, from PIP eligibility. This would save the Exchequer £3.2 billion per annum based on last year's figures. And we will also ensure that every single assessment is done face to face. Now, some of these figures that we present today, I believe, are quite conservative, because we have to look at the other income-based benefits as we help people go back to work. Some for the first time, by the way. We have 1 million people now out of work, young people out of work in this country, and much of that is being driven by mental health problems. And we cannot and must not allow our young people to be labelled as disabled because they may have the odd bout of anxiety. It's not fair on the taxpayer, and it's not fair on our young people. We are literally throwing them on the scrap heap, and we are forgetting about them. No responsible society would ever do that to its young people. Reform UK are committed to supporting the most vulnerable members of our society, but in order to do so, the able-bodied must put a shift in, go to work and pay their taxes to achieve this. And just think how much money this would actually save the NHS. It would unclog our doctors' surgeries, our GP surgeries. It would save literally billions. We want to live in a fair society which helps keep people in the workplace even when they're going through a difficult time. But at the same time, we must support our weak, our vulnerable and our elderly. That's what civilised societies do, and that's what Reform UK will do. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lee. So look, as Lee has pointed out, there are no doubt many people in this country who do have disabilities and do need assistance from the taxpayer. Our proposals continue to protect those people and ensure that they continue to receive those payments. But we have to again look at the extraordinary growth in PIP claims, which are now up to 1,300 per day. That is up from 500 per day in 2019. And one of the points that I want to make about the savings as a result of our proposals is these get bigger and bigger and bigger as you go out, because frankly, like many of the problems that ail this country, the problem compounds and compounds the further one goes out. We know we need to get more people back to work, and so what our proposals are here at Reform are to simultaneously fix the incentives to not work and fix the incentives to get people to work. As Lee pointed out, it is staggering that a household on PIP, Universal Credit Health, Universal Credit Housing and the Standard Allowance get to take home £2,500 more each year than somebody working full time on the minimum wage. I mean, talk about making work pay. The successive Tory governments and now Labour have made not working literally pay far more than working. And the number of houses, the number of people who are on in such a situation, according to analysis from the Centre for Social Justice, is around about 1 million. Around about 1 million. So this is not a small problem. It's already a big problem, and it is getting bigger. So what are our solutions to this? Well, the first thing, as Lee has talked about, a real focus here are young people in this country, defined as those who are under 25. Another staggering statistic that people in this country should know and understand is that if we're to look at payrolls in this country, if you look at under 25s on payrolls, over the last 5 years, non-EU under 25s has gone up 315%. In that same time, UK citizens under 25 on payrolls have gone down. So you're comparing 315%, and that's just non-EU foreign nationals under 25, compared to a decline for UK citizens in that category. This is a catastrophe. And to compound, let us connect that with PIP, which, as Lee said, is a de facto out-of-work benefit. Fewer than 1 in 6 people receiving PIP are in work. Well, which category, which demographic is growing the fastest in terms of PIP claims? Under 25s. Where new claimants have tripled. New claimants have tripled in that same 5-year time period amongst the under 25s. These are the problems that we are trying to solve. So what are we going to do? Firstly, we're going to move everyone back to face-to-face assessments. There is very much a sense of pre-COVID and post-COVID era in all of these problems. You can see this in the data and the charts that our press team have shared with you, some of which are quite astounding and stark. Pre-COVID, the vast majority of assessments for PIP were face-to-face. That was perfectly normal and perfectly standard. Post-COVID, it completely inverted. Almost all of those assessments moved to remote, and that was understandable during the period of COVID itself. But here's the thing, unlike many countries around the world who've done this properly, that hasn't changed. Almost all of the assessments remain remote, and we know from data, from government data, that the success rate of getting onto PIP is meaningfully higher. It is 57% for face-to-face versus, it's 44% for face-to-face and 57% for remote. So we're going to move everyone back to face-to-face. That's the first thing. The second thing is we're going to end payments for non-serious anxiety disorders in terms of PIP and move those people onto a fast-track to work program, which we've budgeted £500 million to be able to do for those around 500,000 people. In doing so, we are going to give them every chance of getting back into work and doing all of the things that Lee has talked about. And while, Lee's anecdotal evidence of his childhood is very powerful and him growing up, there's also an abundance of academic research cited in the press release that we've given you from countries like Holland in particular, but other countries as well in Europe, which have shown a very clear link between reforming disability benefits, getting people back to work programs, and far superior life outcomes for everybody involved. This is a win-win on every front. So those are the three things. We're going to move everybody back to face-to-face and end remote assessments. We're going to end non-serious anxiety disorder payments, and then simultaneously create a fast-track to work program to give those people every chance of getting back to work. How much will this save? Well, by 2029, it will save £9 billion per year, and the cumulative savings over the next 5 years, were these to be enacted now, and with a 12-month transition period baked into their calculations, is north of £30 billion. And that is before one takes into account any positive effects of people actually going back to work. If we were to assume that half of the people who are on those non-serious anxiety disorders were successfully to get back to work, that saving rises to £37 billion over the next 5 years. And again, if you were to look at it 10, 20 years, those numbers compound even more dramatically. So that is what Reform is proposing. This will have a dramatic effect on the curve of growth on the welfare bill generally, which is obviously an enormous amount of money. It helps our young people get back into work. And I want to stress this too. that Nigel has already announced that when he's Prime Minister, we will, of course, end welfare payments to foreign nationals writ large. That is something we're doing. So this is, I just want to be crystal clear, on top of that. We know, we've said this before, we make no apology, Britain has sadly become a food bank for the world. A lot of the data around the cost of foreign nationals on welfare is hidden. The government doesn't disclose it. We do have some information, for example, on universal credit, and that is already staggering. So these are our proposals. We're proud to present them, and we'll take your questions. Thank you.